the story of my Dutch picture. In August 1867, I visited Holland to attend the General Conference of the Evangelical Alliance, held at Amsterdam. This led to other visits during the 2 following years. Altogether, on these 3 occasions, I spent 10 weeks in that country. The time was chiefly occupied in preaching by interpretation, and the Lord graciously confirmed the word with signs following. Though at first told by the public prosecutor that I should be put in prison if I preached in the streets, afterwards I had the joy of thus proclaiming the gospel in The Hague and other places. But the most interesting reminder of these visits is an allegorical picture entitled The Broad and the Narrow Way. My kind host in Amsterdam, Mr. de Hoog, was a bookseller. In his shop window was a chromolithograph of this picture, about 24 inches by 19. Day after day I looked at it, and on returning to England brought 2 copies with me. But, as the Mo explanation was still in Dutch, I made but slow progress in unfolding its meaning. By and by, I induced my young Dutch friend, Frederick Epperminghausen, to translate this into good English, and thus I obtained the key of the position. Then I attempted to describe it, and my hearers were evidently so deeply interested that I decided to have an enlarged copy painted. This proved too small to be of any practical value, so I had a larger one made, and then another, and finally, rather more than 2 years ago, Henry Bevis, the scene painter of Pentonville Hill, prepared me a copy 9 feet by 12, which with a new quintuple dual illuminator, an invention of a friend who is an engineer, enables me to show it with comfort while I am expounding it. The picture may be described as a kind of continental Pilgrim's Progress, and is based on a passage in the Sermon on the Mount, beginning, "Enter ye in at the strait gate," Matthew 7:13-14. In the general foreground are a number of persons, rich and poor, making their choice of 2 gates, one very wide, and the other very narrow. The one with a fine "Welcome" over it, and the other with a plain inscription, "Enter ye in at the strait gate." Venus and Bacchus invite to the unsatisfactory pleasures of the one way, while the preacher tries to induce the people to enter the other. In the centre of the foreground are the tables of the law, the 10 Commandments, with grapes and corn on the right-hand side, to signify blessing and fruitfulness, while on the other side are thorns and briars, and the crawling serpent, signifying barrenness and the curse. The broad way contains the house of the strange woman under the shadow of the theatre, a worldly inn presided over by Bacchus, a ballroom, a band of music, a gambling house, a house of such as take a pledge of the poor, a marketplace, a lottery table, cruelty to animals, children disobeying their parents, a Sunday train and a battlefield. While a second preacher stands far up the road, warning the travellers to turn from their evil ways. The end of the road shows the unerring balances of justice and the awful doom of the wicked, who are sent into everlasting punishment. On entering the narrow way, there is a fountain with Revelation 22:17 over it. Then a cross is seen, on which is a representation of the crucified Redeemer, near which is a friendly church, with the minister giving the cup of communion to a new convert. Then a series of steps are climbed, and a Sunday school is seen, opposite which is a man carrying his cross. A little farther on is a hospital, deaconess house, and an open-air preaching crowd, representing the place for good works. Here a prodigal is restored, and soon after a lion is met and conquered. Then a steep hill is climbed, and soon the New Jerusalem is reached. As the pilgrims approach the city, they see a rainbow, and over all is the eye of the triune Jehovah. Suitable texts are given, so that with an open Bible, the picture is self-interpreting to a considerable extent. I knew from the first that the original was a German production, but only last year did I see a German copy and receive information of its origin. It appears that it was designed by a pious lady, the wife of a wealthy merchant named Mrs. Charlotte Rylan of Stuttgart, was the original designer, and the German Evangelical Society, by whom it was published. It was then circulated as a wall print throughout Germany, and the Dutch, struck with its suitableness to convey moral and religious truth, made a Dutch edition. Such is a brief description of the picture and account of its origin. It has a mission in this country. God has blessed it to the turning of sinners from the broad to the narrow way, as is proved by a number of testimonies I gratefully treasure. Copies may be had, and particulars obtained at the Open Air Mission Office, 14 Duke Street, Adelphia, London, WC.